mindset, yes.
Well, there definitely is a mindset that's going on in Los Angeles among the singer-songwriter crowd, and if none of you have exposed yourselves to it, take a look and see what's going on. It's easy to find. I'm part of it. I'm back to writing music, new music. I'm not trying to copy anything. I'm back to doing it myself, and so many of my friends are starting to do it again, and they're finding places to play. There are places in Venice, there are places in Hollywood, there are places in the Valley, in Altadena. The guy that used to run the Ice House, which was one of the biggest folk music clubs in Pasadena, has reopened as the Coffee Gallery backstage in Altadena, and he has wonderful folk music clubs. I've played there. Bob Stain. And he's alive and well and cooking, and the place is getting better and better. I've done shows there recently within the last year. So yeah, I do agree. There is Kulak's Woodshed also in North Hollywood, a wonderful place that's so reminiscent of the old Laurel Canyon feeling, where people could come, grab their guitar, come down, go to a microphone and start playing, and then they meet each other and they start jamming together and form little groups. Of course, back then, there was always a record executive waiting outside the club to grab you and get you in the studio, because there were maybe a handful of record companies. Now everybody's got his own record company in his basement, and I think the last count was there were 1,000 new CDs released every week. So I just have to believe that out of all of this, there will be some sort of a movement, if you want to call it. But again, the saving grace is what Micky said. The cream rises to the top. Every now and then, you can hear 100 people. Somebody will get up there on stage, and time will stop. And that's always happened, and it'll happen again. It happened when I first heard Jackson Browne at the Troubadour. I can name others, but that's what's happening now. So to answer your question, yes, I think there's a Laurel Canyon spirit, and I think it's happening probably all over. But in Los Angeles, it's humming at the surface. It's not in Laurel Canyon necessarily, but real estate there is too expensive.
Micky, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, in those days, there weren't many places where there was any industry at all. I mean, it was only LA, New York, maybe a little bit in San Francisco. Now there's Nashville. Nashville is a huge singer-songwriter, obviously.
Austin, Texas.
And Austin, Texas. And nowadays, with distribution of the internet, you can have, like you said, you can have your own record company just about anywhere. But back then, it was very, very specific. You had to be here or somewhere like this to get you could be the most incredible singer-songwriter, musician, performer in the world, and if you lived in Duluth, it was going to be tough. It was really be tough to break out. You had to have some A&R guy driving around in a station wagon, and just show up at some club. And they did. Those A&R guys would travel around the country looking for people. But can you imagine the chances of you just being at the same place at the same time? It did happen, but it was tough. And that's why people have always come out here, for not just for music, but for the film and television industry too. It's because this is an industry town. People don't often realize that. This is like Detroit was to cars, and I suppose maybe still is. And it's one of the only industry towns left, Pittsburgh is no longer steel. Can't even think of any others. This is an industry town.
Good point. Steve.
Hi, my name's Michael. I'm guy kind of behind an event called Record Store Day. We launched about 8 years ago. It was all about vinyl. And one of the major reasons that it was so successful was the iconic images that were created by these artists. And I thought about this when I saw the opening segment, and these images, there's Hattrick up there, there's Boris and Mattel, there's a lot of other famous images, the Hot Rats album, there's so many of them. Are there any interesting stories about the creation of these iconic images? Because so many of them were done.
Yeah. Henry.
Yeah, well, that was a great art form, the 12-inch square. And for a long time, I mean, great stuff was coming out. I know that Crosby, Stills, Nash album, On the Couch, my partner Gary Burton was the art director on that. We were partners making these album covers. So we took that picture sitting on that old couch, and Gary told the printers to print it on the back side of the paper, on the uncoated side. Up until then, they always printed on the glossy side. and all album covers were on the glossy side. He said, no, turn it over and print it on the uncoated side. They said, well, we can't do that. It's going to soak up the ink. And he said, I don't care, do it. And he had the power of the group. The group said, do whatever he wants. And it came out, and it was so great. It had that organic feel, kind of like the music, And of course, the record company had a fit. They hated that idea. But as soon as it came out, everybody, the Doors wanted their album cover done that way. Everybody wanted to print on the back side of the paper.
Right.
So, that was one thing that happened. People were coming up with great ideas. It was just such a great art form. There were various camps, doing album covers and blowing each other's minds. It was like the Beach Boys and the Beatles, trying to outdo each other. There were graphic artists trying to come up with new great things.
Okay, just a couple more. Yes.
Yes, can any of you talk about the Laurel Canyon store?
Yeah.
I spent 2 years there one night.
I was going to say that's one reason why the canyon lasted so long, because you have that Laurel Canyon store. And in the early days, you go down there and get a loaf of bread and some milk and coffee. Now they have gourmet foods and international magazines and everything. But that was a great place. You didn't have to go all the way down the hill, to get to the central.
That little center in the middle of Laurel Canyon is just so ripe for some really nice development. We just would be loved.
Last question. Oh, right here. Okay. Sorry.
In reading Neil Young's book, he talks a lot about sound quality now, as opposed to back then. And he's got a project where he's just trying to improve this. Do you all feel that way about when you recorded back then, in terms of what you hear now, that it's been sort of, the sound is often kind of downgraded, it's not as good?
Well, let me speak just as a consumer and a kid buying the records, but in about mid-1968, the Beatles started recording on 8-track, recording during the White Album. So before 1968 or into it, most of the recordings were done on 2-track, very briefly 3-track and 4-track recording. Not tons of overdubs and all that, a lot of live vocals, live takes. People used to play their sets in clubs 6 nights a week, double sets, and then come in and replicate, and do albums sometimes in a week or 2 or 3. So yeah, you had a very organic thing. You didn't have, it didn't take 8 months to have people sit in a room and go make an overdub on a record. Things were done quickly, and you didn't have all these choices of mass overdubs and things like that. And most of the studios out on the West Coast, with the exception of, I think, Columbia, which was a union house, meaning every 3 hours you had to take a break at Columbia Studio. But at RCA Studio, United Western, Gold Star, people started recording more than just 4 hours a day. Like the Rolling Stones started with Jack Nietzsche and Andrew Goldham started block booking studio times, and and then Frank led a migration into all kinds of different recording studios, so ultimately into his own home studio. So you had a very organic situation. You had people very eager. Some of them, much like the R&B groups of Los Angeles in the 50s, all these people were singing for their supper. They didn't have day jobs anymore. They had a record company advance. They were getting married for the first time. Children were showing up. That record either had to be a hit or strong enough to get them on tour. So a lot's were at stake, and you sometimes didn't get a second or third album, and your dreams were shattered. So the records meant a lot. Every moment counted. And luckily, the industry for a while, or the engineers or the recording studios, were letting these people write their own songs and things really were. I think that's the reason why the music holds up today. You didn't have corporate interference. I used to talk to Ray Manzarek about that, and I said, did your record company president ever show up? He said, just like once a month for a meeting or to hear like a final mix. You didn't have a bunch of people hoovering. Nobody had a posse. Things were done. This is very important to these people, because it was, as I say in my new book, this is where it all began. Los Angeles took chances on album artists and gave creativity and freedom, and that's why we're up on this panel today, because the music holds up. But it was people that were actually desperate to make a record because they didn't have nobody here maybe didn't finish college. I mean, I did, but I didn't make records back then. So this was really important that records got done, and you got on tour, and they had to be the very best.
Right.
And people were cooperating with each other, too.
But I would have to add to that, if you don't mind, that what the envelope that was really being pushed then was recording live music. And we're talking about people like Frank Zappa and any band you can think of that was contemporary to him. Those are the dinosaurs of rock and roll that invented silly things like monitor speakers, where one day they just said, hey, take a speaker and put it in front of me and turn it around so I can hear what the drums are playing. And then you have those conditions, and you don't have little boxes that you can just put everything into and play it back on live on stage or whatever. You have to be responsible for every single thing that happens on the stage, whatever anybody is playing, and how it's being recorded in a live situation, because your job, especially as a composer, is to create an audio experience for the ultimate consumer, which is something they want to hear in their home, they're gonna hear in their home. You can't control what kind of sound system they have, so you better know what you're doing in terms of how it's being recorded. So
Yeah.
these are the people that invented what you have today. And that's another reason why most of the people, for a long time, they're probably dying off now, but people that are on film crews that are part of the sound production are all from rock and roll. They all graduated off of those road trips because they're the only ones that can handle, okay, what's the power source? You know, what have we got? How are we going to keep it from feeding back? We plug everything into that thing over there. It's all going to, it's going to hum like a motherfucker. So, there you go.
You can, if you go upstairs on our third level, we have a small, tiny exhibit called From Mono to Surround. And this is aimed at kids, young kids who don't have a large attention span. We're trying to teach them about fidelity and what it means to hear great music in a great setting. And basically what we did was, thanks to the producers and engineers wing, who are some of the best producers and engineers in the world, part of the Recording Academy, what we did was, in about 5 minutes, we took you from, for a kid especially, wax cylinder. What would Beyonce sound like if she recorded on a wax cylinder? And then we went to a gramophone. We basically took you through, the 78s and albums and cassettes with the hissing and 8 tracks and all the way up. And then you get to vinyl, and it's really warm and rich. And then you get to earbuds, okay, what they listen to today. And the music, of course, digital music is very compressed. And they are shocked, as are the teachers, shocked with the loss of fidelity. And then as soon as we got them, then we give them 5.1 surround sound. And they are blown away by it. And they walk out of there understanding something that prior to going into that little booth, that wasn't that important to them, which was how music sounded. So one of our goals is to let them know that music, to understand and to appreciate great music, whatever kind it is, to have a great sound with it and to appreciate great sound is part of the formula. So something that we're interested in. That's a good question that you asked. How about a hand for the panel? Huh? Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. It's 9 o'clock. We're going to stay over for another half hour if you want to go see the rest of the exhibit. There is a Clippers game, okay? And that many of you are parked nearby.